The Twins are on the outside looking in of the playoffs and have nobody to blame but themselves. Tonight on Locked On Twins Live, we're going to parcel out that blame. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren, and you can unfollow me on the tweets at Brandon_WARNE. I am joined, as usual, by Mr. Dave Brown at Answer Dave Brown on the tweets. You can follow him there, and you can also see his coverage of the rest of MLB because that's the kind of guy he is. And so he has been covering MLB in some form or fashion for a quarter century and in the BBWAA for a little over a decade, and a Hall of Fame voter as of this year. And in fact, that's the thing that's the fuse that lit the powder keg that became Locked On Twins with Brandon and Dave. On my behalf, I've been watching the Twins for 30 years, covering them for about half that, and covering them live for a spell there from about 2013 to 2019. Dave, how's it going?
Yeah. The Twins didn't lose today, so it's going okay. But other things happened that are tightening up the reins. It's so tight in here, I can't move.
Yeah, I felt like you were going to hit me with your Blues Brothers. Okay. Because that's kind of what the Twins are at vibes-wise right now. By the way, thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah, the right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. Remember, you can also catch every pitch of the Twins' hometown broadcast with Chris Atterbury and friends on SiriusXM. It was Paul Molitor over the weekend, and I found that highly enjoyable. I love listening to him on the radio, but you can hear those guys by downloading the SXM app. Search Twins. It's Bailey Ober against Ryan Don't Call Me Carl Weathers, 6:40 Target Field coming up here on Tuesday. Twins got a lot of work to do, and you know what? I'm just going to get this out of the way there, Dave. Twins 6 games left. In your estimation, they have to win blank to feel good about their chances.
Blankety blank is right. 3. They have to split the games to. That's like, I wouldn't say feel good,
That's
but
the
I would
Bears
say
minimums.
I feel good. They got to win 3 at least. If they don't win 3, they're not getting in.
Yeah. And so you feel, we were talking about this off the air, but you feel fairly confident that the Royals are kind of in a tailspin akin to the Twins, but to another level where they may just spin themselves out of this race altogether.
Yeah, they have the hardest, we never know exactly how the individual matchups are going, but on the surface, they have the most difficult opponents left. At least, I didn't even add up the records or anything.
Well, six road games. That's already
Yes.
tough enough. And closing in Atlanta, who's fighting for their lives as well, is not great. Washington, as I've noted before, has played the most rookies in MLB, at least on offense this month. But again, that's a team, though, that is young and playing the spoiler role. And so, yeah, I think Kansas City's final 6 are as tough or tougher than pretty much anybody. I mean, Seattle is in Houston, but they've already won on Monday night, and then they have Oakland coming to town. So that's certainly something to watch. They're a half game back in the standings for all intents and purposes, game and a half with the tiebreaker. Detroit has Tampa and the White Sox both at home. I'm about ready to anoint the Tigers as one of the 2 playoff teams, and I don't really have a problem with that. It's just a matter of, can the Twins hold off / catch up to Kansas City and knock off or keep away Seattle?
It's not a huge ask, ASK.
Right.
It's not a big ask, but just, you would have thought that they might have won one more game in Boston, or they would have gotten going a little bit, but still.
At the same time, winning Friday was huge because they had no business winning that game.
Oh, I mean, and they almost didn't about 4 different times.
Right.
I thought, I thought for sure that they weren't going to win it as it was happening. So,
Right.
yeah, I think just because of the tiebreaker, that's kind of their ace in the hole, their the card up their sleeve. I don't know how many more like playing card references I have, but I think that's the thing that a 500 record, 2 out of 3 here, and then I mean they should be able to beat the Orioles 2 out of 3 just because the Orioles are not really playing for anything. So, but
Right.
that kind of thing, Miami just gave the Braves a little bit of trouble. So it's the teams that are out of it, other than the White Sox, you never really know what you're going to get. So you can't really assume anything. That makes you out of me an ass. So you don't want to do that.
No, and I do that enough myself. Yeah, it's Oberweathers, SWR against Edward Cabrera, a guy that I like the Twins to try trade for, and maybe I still do. I don't know. And then Festa against Valente Beloso. And then the Orioles matchups look like Pablo Lopez against Cade, great trade, Falvey Povich, Zebi against Suarez, and then closing it out, Bailey Ober against Dean Kramer. If the Twins have something sewn up by that final day, I would suspect they'd push Ober back to start the first game of whatever playoff series they make.
Wouldn't that be nice if they had something sewn up by then?
Yeah, I mean, and the odds of that are not terribly high. Then again, with that said, if you can sweep Miami, which is the Twins are 8-13 in September, there's nothing that's on the table that should be considered a foregone conclusion, both good or bad. But if they could sweep Miami, then you at least have a shot.
Then you have a really good shot, because then really, if you sweep Miami, all you really have to do probably then is win one game against the Orioles, and you're in good shape. And like we said, that they're not really playing for anything, but you never know. That the Twins are not in a, especially their hitting is just not in a good place right now. It's they occasionally they will give themselves opportunities to score, and then they won't cash in. You sort of feel the pressure yourself sitting there watching the game, as if you have to walk up there with a bat. And you're like, I can't do this. I'm not a professional hitter. And then the guy makes an out anyway, and he is a professional hitter. So you're like, what the heck? And then other times they will go 2 or 3 innings and they'll see 2 or 3 pitches, and it won't seem competitive. So it's like, no matter how they do it, whether they threaten or they make no threats at all, it's can you tell I'm not happy with the offense? Because that's, to me, where a lot of, not to get ahead of ourselves, but that's where a lot of the responsibilities lie lately.
Yes. 3.48 runs per game for this offense in September. Again, 8-13 through 21 games. So 500 still on the table if they win out, which I don't like their odds of that. But as an offense, they've hit 218 as a team this month, 285 on base, 336 slugging. Someone else pointed this out. I apologize because I don't recall who. But they have as many home runs, 16, as ground into double plays, 16 this month. Slugging 336, so as you might expect, let's see, 31, 47.
Boy, does that sound bad, the double play and home run thing.
Yeah,
I don't
49,
know how
49
crazy
extra
that
base
is, or uncommon, but God, that just sounds awful.
Yeah, 49 extra base hits this month, so certainly not ideal in 21 games. Let's do this quickly. Just a quick before we step out for our first ad break. Tigers bringing up Jackson Jobe. Why now, and what do you make of it? Because here's the deal. I'm never going to be against, like, yeah, bring up a guy, give him major league experience, give him a major league paycheck. But if now, why not a week ago? If not long earlier than that? I mean, I'm sure there's reasons. And I'm sure they're envisioning him being a Brandon Finnegan or a Francisco Rodriguez type weapon in the postseason. But I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not against it for their purposes. But then if that was even on the table, why not do it a little bit earlier yet?
Well, it is a little late for those kinds of things. I don't remember when Finnegan came up, But I remember K-Rod once upon a time, long time ago. I don't know like what the status. I mean, he did get a couple of games in at Toledo. I don't know how they ended the season, but he gave up 12 hits in 9 innings. I'm reading this now. 7 strikeouts, 5 walks. So we're not talking about a guy who dominated, albeit in a small sample size, at AAA. So I think maybe they're just trying to catch lightning in a bottle. I don't know how aggressive AJ Hinch is going to be in putting him in high leverage situations. The Tigers already, one of the reasons that they're doing this is because their bullpen has been exquisite lately. So it's not really, it is just a little bit of a wild card. I kind of like it, but also I have very low expectations of when they'll use him and how he'll do.
I think they can just bring him along and give him as much as he can handle, because if he proves capable, you throw him in those spots. If not, you can hide him. Interesting. Detroit, 110 reliever innings pitched this month. That's 20 clear of the Dodgers, who are next most. So not only have they gotten quality, but quantity this month. Worth wondering if they can keep that pace up into October. We will take a quick break here, and then when we come back, we have a lot of blame to hand out. We're playing the blame game with this Twins team that is right now on the outside looking in of the postseason. Well, this episode is brought to you by Booking.com. You can explore those U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about, such as if the Twins go to Baltimore this postseason, or if they go to Cleveland, if they go to Houston. You can check those out. They have hotels, bed and breakfasts, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com that you just might find your perfect stay, even in your baseball's rival city during the postseason. Again, we're knocking on wood that the Twins make the postseason. So maybe it's time to taste test your baseball competition's stadium cuisine. I've seen some crazy stuff coming up from the Cleveland Stadium in the last time. They had Audra eating, it was like a barbecue sandwich with flaming hot Cheetos on it. Honestly, I think I'd try that. She was eating that with Dustin Morse, Twins PR guru. And so that might be reason enough to go on Booking.com and find a place to stay in Cleveland. And with Booking.com's wide variety of choice across the U.S., you can go incognito to all your baseball rival cities. Booking.com delivers exactly the right U.S. stay for you, and it can help you book a stay that's close to your home team's or rival stadium, no matter where you are going. The right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city at Booking.com. Booking.yeah. And of course, we do have to talk about FanDuel. FanDuel is bringing you all the action in the postseason and in the regular season for the NFL. If you are an NFL fan and want to start the season with a big return on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sports book, you can do just that. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You don't even have to win. You could pick, I can't say Carolina Panthers anymore. Andy Dalton went out and lit it up. So I guess we got to pick on the Browns, and deservedly so. Go out and bet on the Browns and win, lose, or draw. $5 turns into $200 in bonus bets on FanDuel.com. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. All right, Dave, I want to go top down to kind of figure out where blame should be laid for this Twins meltdown. Now, again, I'm hesitant to do this and parcel out blame, because I always believe that whenever you cover something, you have to be confident in what you say, and you have to believe what you say. I don't believe that the season is over. I don't believe that this meltdown is going to push them out of the playoffs necessarily. With that said, though, I think it's time enough where it's been bad enough for long enough that you could at least say, hey, things are not going the way they need to, and it's time to we can point fingers. I don't think the Twins are pointing fingers, but I have no problem pointing fingers because guess what? It's good for views. So let's start out at the top. Ownership. Ownership has been a buzzword as far as everybody. Joe Polad, every time the Twins lose a crushing game, it's Joe Polad, Joe Polad, Joe Polad. And we discussed this on the air in our most recent show where you said, well, what if you trade for Sonny Gray and he's hurt now? Or not trade for it, sign him to the deal he got to make up the difference in your payroll. He's hurt now, can't pitch for you in the postseason anyway. Now, again, this is a butterfly effect. We're not trying to say that this is what would have happened. But how much of the blame lays at the feet of Joe Polad for slashing the budget and really hamstringing this team, whether they say so publicly or not, when it came to spending money on player acquisitions?
I haven't really divided up this pie. We
don't have to. We can eat a full piece. We can eat a full pie between the two of us, so it doesn't have to be a percentage. But I think for me, Joe Polad is probably second on the list.
Well, I was going to say maybe 50% is too much.
Yes. If you want to say like 30, I could get down with that. 30, 35.
Yeah, a third. Yeah, maybe a third.
Yeah.
Maybe 33%. It's I guess one thing in his favor kind of was that certainly what we heard from Derek Falvey early in the season was that, yeah, we're going to go out and see if we can bring somebody in. But I would like to think that the Polads were more upfront with the front office and with Rocco than that, and that those guys didn't think that something with the reinforcements were coming ever. Yeah. I hope that that's true, that they weren't like not tricked, but misled, or whether inferred or implied that they were going to make some trades. So hopefully it didn't come as a big surprise that they didn't. So Polad, I'm going to give a third. Now, do you want me to? I've got something ready to blame. You're not yet. Am I going out of order then if I do that?
We'll go through this part and parcel because I obviously think we're going to agree on what it was. Yeah, the cold water they threw on the payroll situation to start the off season, as much as we were like, wow, that seems kind of a mite rash, right sizing the budget and all, which is again still a buzzword and justifiably so. The deadline was a bigger disappointment to me, just not only because their needs were kind of obvious, but I don't know. Since you punted the offseason, you kind of had an obligation. Now, I didn't like the prices that some teams paid for the players they acquired, and I understand that if the White Sox aren't going to take Luke Keeschel for Eric Fetty, there's not much you can do about that. Like if Chris Getz isn't going to trade you, I know the Twins ran on Michael Kopech. If you make a big trade for Kopech and Fetty, I don't know, man. I mean, things probably look quite a bit different right now. But again, maybe they don't. Like we've said with the Sonny Gray thing, who knows in that 2-month vacuum if things had been different. And so what that kind of comes back to, and my primary source of blame, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but both of those guys were pitchers. Sonny Gray, pitcher. This offense has been absolute dog bleep for a very long time. Again, in September, I'm just going to break this down. In September, 218, 285, 336. The only players with appreciable plate appearances and an OPS over 800, Kyle Farmer at 1,150, which is just insane, and Carlos Correa at 808. He's been back for 7 games. Matt Wallner, 748. Trevor Larnach, 733. Carlos Santana, 686. Byron Buxton, 669. That's not nice. Royce Lewis, 610. Willie Castro, 591. 493 for Christian Vasquez. 472, Jose Miranda. 443, Edouard Julien. 411, Brooks Lee. And we still have guys who are getting lots of playing time. Ryan Jeffers, 389. Ryan Jeffers has a 1-1-1. All 3 of his slash numbers begin with a 1 for this month. The offense has been absolute crap. And that is, to me, 50% of this issue.
I don't know that it's that high. My response, though, to that would sort of fold in the offense into maybe even a little bit of a bigger picture with why maybe it's failing or hasn't been as good as it could have been. If you go to the Baseball Reference homepage, and this is not strictly scientific, but they have on the Twins page, baseball-reference.com/team/min/2024.shtml, top 12 players. The top 12 players, they got pictures of them. Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton, Bailey Ober, Griffin Jax, good, Joe Ryan. 3 of the first 5 guys on this list have missed significant time and have lately, and it's coincided with the nosedive. They haven't had 3 of their best 5 players for most of the second half, and it's inescapable. If Rocco were here, I think that's what he would remind everybody of, that those guys haven't been in the lineup and Joe Ryan hasn't been in the rotation, and there's domino effects that come into play. I don't disagree with what you said about the offense, but I think, and nowhere on this list is Royce Lewis. He does not have his picture up, and he's been in the lineup. I think that would kind of surprise people if they, didn't see that coming. He's not anywhere on this list. His photo does not appear. He's not one of the 12 most valuable players by WAR.
He's second on the team in games played this month too. 20.
Right.
Only Matt Wallner.
It's a huge void, a huge vacuum. And so I don't think it's my deal isn't necessarily blaming individuals or saying it's the offense, the individuals have their blame. The offense has its blame. But I think if you look at the best players on this team, they haven't had them a lot. And it's taken its toll for all the talk that we had about, well, they got depth. And, if they didn't have depth, they wouldn't be in a position to still make the playoffs possibly, because, and we're still talking about, like our conversation earlier, we mentioned, well, if they go 3-3, pretty good shape, 4-2, really good shape. We're talking about a handful of games. They've been missing guys for weeks in one form or another. And, here they are still kind of hanging on. I thought about this, though. I don't know what I think of, I like to be optimistic or half full or not doom and gloom. But, even if the Twins do get in the playoffs, I'm thinking about, well, what kind of chances would I give them? And it wouldn't be very good at this point. So even if they make it, I look more at a team like Seattle with their starting pitching as maybe more dangerous, although their bullpen isn't great. I look at the Tigers, great bullpen, and Tarek Skubal and kind of the hot hand. I look at the Yankees and the 2 great players in their lineup and a really solid bullpen and decent pitching. I look at those guys. And then, Cleveland, most people aren't going to count them out because we've counted them out or counted them for regression all year, and it hasn't happened. But, there's 5 or 6 teams I would give a much better chance of getting to the World Series than the Twins at this point. Sorry to say.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. Yeah. For some added context before we go to our last break here, the Twins offensive line, again, 218, 285, 336 this month. That's 774 plate appearances. So a bit more than a leadoff hitter who plays 160 games would get. Yeah. Your classic Jimmy Rollins season where he'd play every day and get 700 plate appearances. So it's prolonged and it's not good. All right, let's do our final break. When we come back, I got one last thing about payroll, which is not that big of a thing to add because we've kind of beat that to death. And we'll talk about some pitching and other things and get out of here. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because unlike other apps, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch your winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as few as 4 correct picks. You just play with those multipliers and you pick riskier things. The multipliers are higher. The more safe you go, the lower they are. You can kind of mix and match based on your risk tolerance, easy for me to say, and watch the winnings roll in. It's available in more than 30 states, most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. It's also the only real money daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your picks still alive. Also, PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks, and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. So a quick payroll thing, if they make the playoffs and do or do not make any noise with the payroll cut, does that give added justification in the mind of Joe Pola that doing that was the right thing? I hate the thought of that. Dave, you're muted. You're muted, David.
Because I was Kaufman Stadium.
Okay, so yeah, if Joe Polad says, "Hey, you made the playoffs with less money," that means it worked.
Well, I heard you. You just didn't hear me. So you didn't
Hey, well, you know what I mean.
It would not take much for Joe Polad or anyone else in his position to talk himself into feeling that way. It's like, hey, if we make the playoffs, we must have done the right thing, holding back. And, but that's how baseball has set it up. This is not just a Twins thing. Again, this is baseball is, encouraging mediocrity. That's what it's going for. The mediocre middle. That it's not, go all out and spend all out and try and field the best team that you can. It's, kind of do just enough to get competitive. And then maybe if you get lucky, then you'll get hot and do something in the playoffs. And it's not really anything more than that. That was the whole point of adding the extra wild card teams, to make the middle a place where more teams could get to without having to try. And that's kind of half the philosophy. I'm sure, the Twins have spent more money in the last few years than I think fans are used to them spending, but they definitely are concerned about the future to a fault, as far as local broadcast revenues and streams from the local TV and all that stuff. So they've talked, looking at it charitably, you could say that they've talked themselves into this position. And it isn't necessarily a thing where they don't, where they could even say, well, we don't, we want to spend money, but it's not really something that we feel comfortable doing because we're worried about, what the deal is with Bally Sports and where we're going to put the Twins games on and how we're going to get revenue from that. And we're a small town and blah, blah, blah. So they've definitely talked themselves into this position as being something that's responsible. And it's not, the family has enough money to spend more money than they do on baseball players. They're choosing not to. It's still a choice, and it's okay for fans to be upset at it. I would be upset if I was a Twins fan. It's how I would feel that the ownership is letting them down. Is that 100% of why the Twins are fizzling and kind of failing at the end of the season? No, but it sure would have been nice to have some reinforcements come in, and it might just change the look of the rest of the season if they had done it.
Well, thanks. I hate it. So front office, the moves they made or didn't make, do you give them much blame? Because honestly, as much as they publicly say, we had the okay to make a deal at the deadline, And I think it fits their MO that they didn't make a deal because of how they valued their internal reinforcements. They can sell that line without it being too controversial. But I do think that, they were not going out and adding much in the way of money. I mean, Eric Fetty made so much sense because of the money he was and or was not making. But for me, the front office, I'm not saying they skate by with no issues, and I'm not saying that they're blameless. But if it was to come down to would these guys get fired or not renewed, for me, if they don't make the playoffs, that's an easy bring them back. I have no issues bringing those guys back and be happy to do it.
I think they were a little hesitant to make another round of Tyler Mahle type trades, and they were worried about getting burned on not having the next Spencer Steer in the organization. I think that gave them pause, and I think that's too bad and a mistake if that's what kept them from doing it. Too many resources for the future for this season. But I still say that this was the season to strike, to make an attempt to strike. The bigger mistake from the organization standpoint was not doing something over the winter where all it costs was money rather than other resources, talent that you have in the organization. I think that's where the bigger blame is.
Well, we have actually a comment in the chat, and it was where I was going next anyway. Blake Hellberg wants to know, does Rocco get fired? I'm assuming if they don't make the postseason. And
non-zero chance. I think there's a non-zero chance. I think it's possible.
If the front office isn't back, again, for all we've heard about them not having contracts beyond this year, who's to say they don't bring in whoever and those people don't want Rocco? I think Rocco's a good manager. I think in some ways maybe him using the way he did Trevor Richards and even in the Boston series, Cole Irvin is like, this is what you gave me. What do you want me to do? I used 7 relievers on Friday night, pulled a rabbit out of my hat, and we won that ball game by against all odds. This is what you left me. And again, I still think they've had plenty of bad luck on the bullpen front in terms of Brock Stewart getting hurt, Jorge Alcala taking a step back, like normal bullpen things that are hard to plan for because you have 40-man rosters. And, if you give a big contract to a reliever, it doesn't guarantee their year-to-year performance, anything like that. Bullpens are finicky. They're hard to predict. But I think Rocco has done a good enough job where I'm not thinking he loses his job on merit. I think he loses it on if they don't make it, and the front office is gone. I think it would be both or neither, personally.
I think what will happen based on the overall general success that Rocco has had as a manager, especially in recent seasons, is the kind of thing that you see on other teams where there is an assistant that loses their job, 1 or 2 maybe, and changes are made there in the coaching staff. I think that is more likely than Rocco. But it has occurred to me that if the general managers of the world and the owners of the world, as far as the Twins go, think Rocco made a mistake by taking out Bailey Ober against the Royals, or Rocco should have kept going with Zebby. I don't think those moves led to a malaise or anything like hangover effect, because he brought in, just thinking about the Zebby game, I think the move, if he was going to make one, might have been to go to Sands sooner, and Sands was terrible in that game, so that didn't matter anyway. And Zebby was up 87 pitches or so. That's typical for taking him out at that point. Once you get over 75, he loses. Yeah. So mistakes, individual, but you can't say that cost them the Red Sox game, because the offense didn't score any runs.
That's been the problem.
And the bullpen was terrible when they brought him in. So, and the good pitchers were Sands was used. So, not to relitigate all that stuff, but you can blame Rocco for a few moments here or there, but I don't think that is the reason why they're not going to win. And I think Rocco does a lot more good than harm as far as those decisions go, and have gone. Now, like I said, maybe the compromise here is to make some changes, because this is the second time in 3 years that the offense has kind of gone strange places and kind of disappeared. So there might be some changes there that they could make.
But who would fire Rocco? It'd be the front office guys, right? And if
Right.
the theory,
Or it could be like, but that would be the whole thing about the whole narrative that we've pushed about how the Twins could have spent more money and didn't, or were restricted by payroll. I mean, that the owners, they're not dumb. They know that that's out there. So for them to turn around and say, well, we got to change the managers, or even bigger, get rid of the front office guys, they would be asking the fan base to swallow a lot. For all the people that get upset about the individual trades that Falvey made that didn't work out, or the stuff that Rocco does, it's just the loudest people on Twitter that are like that. It would be, you're asking the fan base to swallow a lot and say, oh yeah, these are the reasons why the Twins didn't win, because Rocco screwed it up. It's just not, it's just not believable. So,
well, and the Pohlad family, at least in the past, has been built on loyalty. TK, Gardy, Molitor, Rocco. Who am I missing? Nobody, right?
I don't think so.
4 managers since 1986,
right?
Since I was born. I mean, that's something to think about. And
maybe what they should do is encourage some turnover of, the players on the roster that they can move, that have value. Some left-handed hitting outfielders who sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not. Maybe move them somewhere, make some trades, get some different players of similar age in different positions, shore up, maybe we want a right-handed hitting outfielder, bring in another pitcher somewhere. Things like that I could see. But, nothing would surprise me. If they decided to fire Rocco, I'd only be like 25% surprised.
Well, they could have brought in Victor Robles. I think I remember somebody banging the drum for that. But
Victor Robles almost cost the Mariners the other day by trying to steal home.
But Rafa
that chicken almost came home to roost, but they've overcome it.
But Rafa Nieves tweeted, I assume that's his agent, that he, since a certain day, is like 8th in the AL in position player WAR. So he's been a nice player for a team that has
contract extension.
Yeah, right, and not a crazy one. The one thing I thought about with Rocco too is the prevailing theme from a lot of people on Twitter is that the moves come from above. Oh, at 2:00 the pitching moves are decided. Well, if you truly believe that, and I don't necessarily, I believe there's input. Well, then why would you fire a manager who's doing that for you? Your figurehead, so to speak.
That's a great point.
So I don't know. I mean, good luck finding another manager unless Derek Shelton gets fired by the Pirates or James Rowson becomes available. Someone who has worked in that infrastructure and would be like, okay, I know what I'm getting into. The interview process is not going to be a massive surprise. I
just don't. The more I think about it, the less I think it's likely that they're going to axe Rocco. I just don't, or even axe him to leave.
Yeah, very briefly, pitching staff. In September, the starters have a, 4.03 ERA, 1.32 whip. They've allowed a slash of 254, 317, 399. So not terrible. Averaging fewer than 5 innings per start, which is kind of by design. In fact, the Twins and Guardians have both gotten 102 2/3 innings out of starters this month. So it's not as though, and 4.89 innings per start. So they're doing a lot of things similarly in terms of massaging pitching. Obviously, the difference is the bullpen for Cleveland has been nails, and for the Twins has been fails. For the Twins in September, bullpen 5.16 ERA. Only the Marlins, Nationals, Rangers, and Diamondbacks have been worse. 137 whip, 263, 341, 410 for a 750 OPS. Walks, when you have a high whip and a pretty big OBP and not much slugging, they're giving up singles and walks. They're getting nickeled and dimed to death. And I think that shows in watching these games and just feeling like the back-breaking things that happen are just like that. And again, too, if you're playing the Guardians, of course you're going to get nickeled and dimed to death. That's just kind of what they do. So
that's also how they like to spend, doggone it.
Yeah, I mean they're they've got a type. And so I don't, there was that narrative, the pitching they ran out of pitchers. Well, I'm not so sure about that, because in the entire month, all the pitching on the team, Twins have a 4.53 ERA, 1.34 WHIP. That's an inflated ERA, no doubt about that. Again, that might be built into what time of year it is too. Every team is, they're really trying to massage their pitching staffs. Pitching ERA this month as a collective league, MLB, is 3.87. So I don't know how that skews, but I just know there's a lot of teams starting guys that you would have never dreamed of 3 months ago. That's just the way it is. I generally
like how the starting pitching is trending for the big picture for next season. Pablo had the clunker the other day against the Red Sox. That was disappointing, but he's been absolutely an ace and nails other than that.
Well, and how was that for a turn of events where they had the bases loaded and then didn't score? Pablo turns around and does that, and it was just like classic Twins,
Kind of, yeah, an indicator that, well, maybe this isn't meant to be.
I was
worried about Tristan Casas going into that series, though. He's easily the most dangerous. Jarren Duran's having a great year, but Casas is a deadly hitter who's had kind of a bad season for injuries and so forth. But he's that's a guy who's going to burn a lot of guys.
Chris Atterbury, though, brought up a good point in that first inning. When Alex Cora was arguing, he stepped on the mound. And if that had been counted as a mound visit, then later in the inning, when the acting manager came out, or the pitching coach or whoever, that could have been a forced pitching change in the first inning. Now, the works cited on that was it happened to the Twins against the Astros last year before, and it made Rocco look pretty bad. It made him look like he made a big mistake. Well, they didn't charge a mound visit. Rocco didn't press the issue, it doesn't appear. But that was an interesting thought, because that first inning spiraled to the point where Pivetta needed a formal mound visit. And if that had been hey, go get your guy in game one of a doubleheader in the first inning, I mean, that changes the entire dynamic of that day.
I did not notice this at the time. I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but I did not see it when it happened. So I can go, by your story. My response would be, well, I don't know that the Twins would have hit whoever the Red Sox are bringing in at that point anyway. So the way they're going
at that point, they could have brought in Rafael Devers with his bad shoulder, and they'd have still been fine.
Something like that, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So I'm offense and then front office. Those two together are about 85% for me. If you want to parcel out individual stuff, Carlos Santana's fallen apart. Royce Lewis has fallen apart. Ryan Jeffers has become an absolute liability offensively, and his defense has not been as good as I thought it would be this year. If people want to argue that, I don't care. But there's just so many, everybody wants to blame one person or one thing or another. There's plenty of blame to be handed out, but at the end of the day, the players got to play. And so the offense, I mean, you got Brooks Lee, Jose Miranda, and Edouard Julien all with like 400 or worse OPSs in this month. It's mind-boggling that these things happen all at the same time. Offense is contagious. Yeah, well, so is a cold. And it feels like this entire offense is, in need of some vitamin C.
It's as cold as ice. You willing to sacrifice our season?
Yeah, it's about where it is. Well, Dave, we've gone over our limit, but I think it was worth it, because this discussion deserved a little extra time, and we had a pretty good audience. We had some people hanging out with us. Thanks to everyone who sent in messages that did or did not get on, but we are out of time. And so for Dave Brown, that's him right there.
Bye.
And this is Brandon Warren, easy for me to say again, signing off, saying thank you so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see ya
tomorrow
night.
nightly tomorrow.
after they beat the Marlins, hopefully.
Well, you hope.
Yeah.
And count it